Hello and welcome back to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. In today's video, we are going to add the next 10 creatures with mana values of 8 or more into our Momir Vig Cube. What's up, MTG BC, baby? You are the MTG Burgeoning community. Welcome back to another installment of our ongoing Momir Vig Cube series. If you are unfamiliar with this series or you just need a refresher, you can search out in the description below a link to MTG Burgeoning's introduction to the Momir Vig Cube. And while you're down there stomping around in the description, you can also click the link to Cube Cobra, where you can see the entire contents of the cube as it stands right now. So for today, we've got 10 creatures with mana value 8 or more going into the Momir Vig Cube. Remember, specific to this Momir Vig Cube, the most mana that you can jam into your avatar is 8. And you have a 1 in 3 chance of summoning a copy of a creature from the Momir Vig Cube with a CMC greater than 8. In this video today, we'll see 2 of those such creatures, including the very first one, which is colorless. It is Scion of Draco. We got a 4/4 dragon from MH2. There we go. It has flying. The domain ability does not count here because it's never in our hand and it's randomly summoned from the Momir Vig Cube. However, what this creature could do from the 8 spot is each creature we control is going to get some form of an ability. If the creature is white, it's going to get Vigilance. If the creature is blue, it's going to get Hexproof. If the creature is black, it's going to get Lifelink. If the creature is red, it gets First Strike. And if the creature is green, it's going to get Trample. Although it's possible, it is highly unlikely that when Scion of Draco hits the battlefield, every one of your creatures is going to be colorless. So in some way, shape, or form, this 4/4 flyer from MH2 is going to help out the team by imbuing it with so many different abilities. From one dragon to another, next is Scourge of Care Ridges, a 6/6 flyer, which in and of itself could be quite a beater in a format where combat is everything. However, we have a couple of activated abilities here that could also be game-breaking. For every 1 in red mana we pay, Scourge of Care Ridges deals 2 damage to each creature without flying. Wiping out entire armies of walkers could be the difference between winning and losing in a game of Momir Vig. And if needed, and this one's a tough stretch because this is something that could really wreck the entire battlefield for our opponents. We can pay 5 in a red, and Scourge of Care Ridges will deal 6 damage to each other creature with flying. We can clear the air of all potential blocking creatures for Scourge of Care Ridges that fly. Reachers won't be affected by that ability, but that's what the first ability is for. Both of these abilities are only going to be possible if you have those mountains in the basic land library. So be sure to diversify your basic land library. Make sure you've got those mountains in that deck. Next creature up from the 8 spot. This could be one of the premier creatures from this tier, and it's absolutely one of the premier creatures from the entire cube. It is Sphinx of the Steel Wind. It's a 6/6 Sphinx that has flying, First Strike, Vigilance, Lifelink, protection from red, and protection from green. So let's just take a dive and look into this creature a little bit more. It has the evasion of flying. It has the defensiveness of Vigilance. It also has the first strike ability, meaning anything it blocks, it's going to deal its damage first. The life link is going to gain 6 life every time it enters into combat if it's dealing combat damage to a player or to another creature. That 6 life should not be overlooked because that's 25% of a starting life total in the Momir Vig variant. We begin with 24. Sending a creature into combat or blocking with it and gaining 6 life each shot, that's game ending, or at least it's dragging out the game in such a way that our opponents may never be able to recover. And in addition to the evasion of flying and the defensiveness of first strike and vigilance, we also have 2 forms of protection which are very, very important. The protection from red means that creatures such as Scourge of Care Ridges will not be able to block it, Scourge of Care Ridges can't deal damage to it, and Scourge of Care Ridges gets blocked easily by the Sphinx, and the Sphinx takes no damage. And that's not the only dragon in the Momir Vig Cube. Additionally, protection from green works extraordinarily well with the vigilance mechanic here on the Sphinx. We're sending this into combat. With the vigilance, it remains untapped, so we have it available for blocking, and green has some biggins, folks, and we will have protection from green if those biggins decide to come and look anywhere near our life total. Sphinx of the Steel Wind is one of the most powerful creatures in this Momir Vig Cube, and it can absolutely be looked at as a game ender. All right, next up, we're staying with an Esper-colored creature. We're staying with an artifact creature. We're staying with the Sphinx. It's the Sphinx Sovereign. Here we have a 6/6 flyer, no other abilities except at the end of our turn, we will gain 3 life if Sphinx Sovereign is untapped. Otherwise, each opponent loses 3 life. So think about this for a second. We have a monstrous flyer at 6/6. The evasion is fantastic because not every player is going to be lucky enough to have evasive creatures on their side of the battlefield. If this is untapped, we're going to gain 3 life. But why aren't we sending this into combat? We're going to send it into combat. We're going to find the weak opponent. It's going to deal the 6 points of damage. And then at the beginning of our end step, each opponent is going to lose 3 life. That's going to rack up very quickly, particularly because, as I said earlier, each player only begins with 24 life. All right, reaching the halfway point here, we have Spirit of the Night, a 6/5 flying, trampling, protection from black, first strike when attacking, and it has haste. Spirit of the Night can come down immediately and do a ton of damage. Wow, that's a lot of abilities for the Spirit and a fantastic creature to come down from the 8-drop and one of the creatures that has a higher mana value than 8. All right, creature number 6, we're going mono white, and here we have Silver Seraph. We have a, come on, get in, there we go. Oh, it's so hard to see the old retro borders in white on camera. We have a 6/6 flyer that has the Threshold mechanic. If we remember Threshold way back to the time of Judgment, Threshold is going to have it's a mechanic that requires our graveyard to have at least 7 or more cards in it to trigger. If we're in the 8th spot here and we're casting Silver Seraph, it seems pretty likely that we've already discarded at least 7 cards in order to summon a copy of this to our side of the cube. And when we do, Silver Seraph gives other creatures we control a double Anthem effect, gives them +2/+2. Note, it does not give the +2/+2 to itself. But we still have a 6/6 flyer for 8 mana. All right, next up, we're going back to multicolored for Sisters of Stone Death. We have a 7/5 Gorgon that if we pay a green mana, target creature blocks Sisters of Stone Death this turn if they are able. We can tap a black and a green, and we can exile target creature blocking or blocked by Sisters of Stone Death. The last ability will not be relevant in our format because, again, every creature that's summoned from the Momir Vig Cube is a token copy of that creature. So once the token leaves the battlefield, it ceases to exist. So as long as we have the green and black mana in order to activate Sisters of Stone Death's first 2 abilities, we should be able to wreak a lot of havoc on the battlefield. All right, we're down to 3 creatures. Next up is a mono green edition. It is the Skarg Goliath. It's a 9/9 trampler. That's all. The Blood Rush mechanic is not going to be viable here because we are randomly summoning these creatures from the Momir Vig Cube and they are never in our hand. Still, a 9/9 trampler for 8 mana is not a bad return on that investment. All right, 2 to go. Next up, we have Sphinx of the Second Sun, a 6/6 flyer. At the beginning of our post-combat main phase, we get an additional beginning phase, which means we're going to get an extra untap, an extra upkeep, and an extra draw. At this point in the game, cards in hand are as rare as winter roses, so Sphinx of the Second Sun wants to make sure that each turn you're going to draw 2 cards, and on top of that, we're getting a 6/6 flyer. And as a bonus, if we're fortunate enough to have any creatures that have at the beginning of your upkeep triggers, well, they're going to trigger again with Sphinx of the Second Sun. All right, and creature number 10, bringing this video to a close, it is the Stonehoof Chieftain, an 8/8 trampling, indestructible centaur warrior, and whenever another creature we control attacks, it also gains trample and indestructible until end of turn. This is the game ender. Stonehoof Chieftain's going to come down. It's going to give our entire squad evasion in the form of trample, and it's going to give our entire squad protection in the form of indestructible. We turn all those bad boys sideways and watch our opponent's life totals just plummet straight down to 0 or hopefully into the negatives. And there you have it, MTG BC. 10 more creature cards with mana values of 8 or more heading right into our Momir Vig Cube as we inch closer and closer to the cube's completion. Which of these creatures are your favorites? This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.